Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dominions 5 Basic Nation Analysis, and this is Early Age Now, was actually, fun fact, the nation that I first ever played Dominions 4 with. I started my very first single-player game of Dominions 4 with Early Age and I was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I was messing around with half-remembered stuff from the Dominions 3 that I had free sample that I had participated in. It was pretty bad. And I naturally did not accomplish much because I didn't know, as I said, what I was doing. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to specifically, that hasn't changed a whole lot. Like, is kind of a tricky nation to use, for a variety of reasons. They have some very notable national strengths, but also a lot of very notable national weaknesses that conspire to, in my opinion, put them sort of in the lower half of the rankings in the early age. So, let's talk about is a nation of Enkidu, which are size 3 horned people, and they have, let's find one who hasn't been injured, they have high hit points, they have decent stats, high strength. However, they have two very grave deficiencies which make them bad. Actually, 3. First of all, they're size 3 and only have 1 attack, so their attack density is low. Secondly, they have quite low protection. They wear shitty armor. They wear bronze scale hauberks at best. And those bronze scale hauberks are bad armor. They're low protection, and so you have low body protection overall. Also, they don't wear hats. No unit that has access to wears helmets. Literally none of them. As a result of not wearing helmets, they are incredibly susceptible to headshots. So against ranged units, they die very quickly, much more quickly than you would expect from their hit points. Even against regular infantry with spears, a headshot is liable to kill them because it will go through and be rolling, 9, 10, 11 damage plus 2d6 against their 2d6, and it only takes a little bit of bad luck to more or less go down from one hit, especially because the way the head works is if you take more than half of your HP in head damage, you die instantly. So, yeah, I believe it's from any type of weapon. I know it happens from magic damage, I know it happens from slashing damage, and I think it also happens from piercing and bludgeoning damage. So, effectively, if they're hit in the head, Enkidu actually have 12 hit points and no armor, which makes them, as you can see, a little bit fragile. Now, if you look at my expansion has been pretty reasonable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 provinces on turn 12. Not bad. However, you may also notice I don't have any forts built. That's because of another problem has. Their forts are expensive and they're long, because city palisades for them city palisades in general are forts that take longer and cost more. Now, upside, they get their commander point bonus right away, but they have to start earlier in order to have them built. You may also notice I have a couple of labs built outside of forts. I'll talk about why that is in a second. In terms of lineup, has garbage troops, slightly less garbage but a lot more expensive in resources troops, still pretty garbage troops, and sacreds, who are fairly garbage. Once again, protection 11, no helmet. There is no reasonable combination of bless that makes Enki's Chosen good. You can give them blesses that make them less bad. Fortitude is one that makes them less bad. Regeneration is definitely one that's good for them, that makes them a lot less bad. But they still essentially have the problem of durability. Enki's Chosen don't live through battles. They just don't. Boy, especially in big battles, it is hard to get Enki's Chosen to live through them unless you have layered a bunch of buff spells on them in the mid game and late game. Now, has great paths for casting buff spells for a few reasons. First of all, there's also this guy, the Mushushu. The Mushushu is recruitable only in the capital. He's sacred, he causes fear, he has multiple attacks, tons of hit points, high natural protection, albeit no armor, good stats, high strength. However, there's a problem with him. There are two problems with him, actually. The first is that he costs 150 gold. A good bit more than a Nephil Giant, more than an Anakite, who is an objectively superior unit in all kinds of ways. And you can only recruit 1 per turn. You can't have 2 under any circumstances. Which means that they're not massable. You can't, reaching a critical mass of Mushushus takes like 10 turns. And in that time, your expansion should be mostly done. So, they would be good units, except they're not good units. They're not you can't mass them up enough to make them good. Now, once again, high-level blesses can be very effective for Mushushus. Regeneration, they regenerate 7 hit points a round, which is quite powerful. Fortitude, having the damage they take after their reasonable protection, makes them very tough to kill. So you have options there. But overall, it's hard to do. It's hard to manage, especially because you do need some scales, since your units cost mostly more recruitment points and certainly a lot more gold than human units, while not actually overall being better at their job. Enkidu soldiers, for example, 16 gold, 7 resources. Compared to human light infantry, these guys are not better chaff, which is what you recruit them for. You don't recruit these guys to be the main killing power of your army. You want them to be chaff, and they're no better as chaff than cheaper human units that cost 10 gold and wear armor. So, troop-wise, is sad. They suck. It's garbage. They do have this Enkidu Hornblower who has a standard effect, and so gives their squad extra morale, which is nice. But honestly, morale is not necessarily your problem. Your morale is slightly above average on every unit. You're fine in terms of morale. No, the problem is that you don't win. Like, these guys just don't win fights because they refuse to wear helmets and their armor sucks. So they lose fights. They take hits and take damage and lose and die. Guards are good castle defenders. 1.8 for 19 gold. They are approximately as efficient as average. Actually, they're a good bit more efficient than average human troops. And in general, Enkidu are good at breaking down forts. But that's about all they're really good for. In terms of mages, however, has really pretty good mages. You've got this Enkidu Elder who is a commander who's extremely cheap and inflicts a morale penalty, which is sort of hilarious. But he's not very good at things. You've got this Enkidu commander who is a worse commander but doesn't penalize morale. You have the Gala. The Gala is a level 1 nature, level 1 priest spell singer, so half fatigue on nature spells for cheap, which is nice. Also cheap upkeep because of sacred. And an Elegist. So she counts as Holy 3 for the purpose of calling back your god. On top of that, has a special national feature where if your god dies, they don't lose magic for coming back from the dead. So if you have a bunch of galas, if you have 10 galas and you set them to call god, on average you get your god back in 2 turns. Which is actually quite handy, especially if you don't use a proper super combatant god and try to expand with them. The Salme is 100 gold for water nature crosspath plus sacred. Not bad. Not fantastic, but not bad. The Gudu is your first actual combat mage. 155 gold for linked random, either 2 air or 2 earth. These guys are really solid. 155 gold for air 2 guaranteed is good. 155 gold for earth 2 is also good. The earth ones can cast earth power. The air ones can cast storm power with a little bit of ratcheting up from other aids. And Thunderstrike, the earth ones can of course cast all the earth buffs. Very, very good. Gudus are going to be the main part of your battle mage core for some time. The Ishib is a little bit less usable, mainly because water is a worse path. However, having that available water access is fine. And you have nature, earth, or air randoms, so not as good as the Gudu, but still there, can still do things. Sometimes you need water magic, or you want water magic. Then you have 2 capital-only mages, the N2 and the NC. The N2, at least I think they're both capital only. Yeah, they are. I'm sorry, I temporarily lost my mind there. The N2 is an earth nature mage, has a random that includes water and air, and Holy 3, plus inspirational +2, but with garbage leadership values, which is sort of funny. It almost makes you want to take like an inspirational leadership bless, so that N2s can lead armies at +3 leadership, and then you can maybe put a hat on them or something, a whip of command, I don't know, something, but it, could be interesting. That said, you don't really have the bless points for that. But earth and nature are always good combinations. That said, N2s are really redundant, and I'll show you why. You don't really need them. The NC, then, is a water nature mage with a random. Once again, you don't really need them a whole lot. They're Holy 3, and having recruitable Holy 3 is really good, because it means you can claim thrones without using your god. But beyond that, you won't need a whole lot of NCs. However, there's a reason that I'm building labs with no forts next to them. The Enkidu Shaman is the actual magical powerhouse of your nation, can only be recruited outside forts, so effectively slow to recruit and fairly expensive, but for 275 gold, you get Earth 2 Nature 3 plus a random, which is mostly going to be either Earth or Nature. So you have lots of Earth 3, and you have lots of Nature 4. Enkidu Shamans are as good at nature magic as Pans are. Has excellent nature access, and they have excellent Earth access, and Enkidu Shamans can cast Strength of Gaia to boost themselves up to Nature 5, and they can hold the Thistle Mace and boost themselves up to Nature 6, and cast pretty much every nature spell in the game. They are very, very powerful. Extremely powerful. Enkidu Shamans can forge Staves of the Tree Lord, or Tree Lord Staves, natively. Nature 4 random with a Thistle Mace is Nature 5. They can cast Mother Oak natively with no God build or boosting required. Very, very good. Very, very solid. On top of that, you have special mages and recruitment in swamps. In swamps, you can recruit the Enkidu Hunter and Reaver units, as well as the Enkidu Hunter Chief, Headhunter, and Bone Reader. The important one is the Bone Reader, because the Bone Reader is a death mage. 120 gold, Earth 1, Death 1, plus a random. These guys break you into death in a very solid way, because they give you native Death 2. They give you the Death Earth crosspath, so you can do the forging and the spellcasting that comes with that. You can cast Blight. You can forge Shade Mail, which lets you give your commanders stealth on demand. And they're cheap. 120 gold for 3 paths, really, really good. That's 40 gold per path. Extremely effective. On top of that, they're stealthy, and they are fortune tellers. So they can negate misfortune, and they can hop around stealth rating. The Death 2 guys can Skell spam, the Earth 2 guys can cast Earth buffs and Blight and stuff like that. They're very, very useful. Enkidu Reavers would be your best unit. They have Berserker 3, which means they hit very often, and it bumps their protection up to about as good as it ever gets. However, and of course they don't rout, and they're stealthy. However, they're only recruitable in swamps, and they require 23 recruitment points each. So the result is, basically, you can recruit one of these guys per swamp per turn. And it's not really quite worth it. Enkidu Hunters aren't terrible, because they also berserk and are stealth, so you can use them for stealth raiders later in the game once you have buffs, because, you know, out of a swamp you can easily recruit 3 or 4 of these guys per turn, and build up a nice little raiding party. That said, in case of a swamp like this where I have Lizard Warriors are actually superior to either, because they have 2 attacks, and they do more damage. So, I mean, it's kind of a condemnation of Enkidu troops that their best units are still inferior to moderately high-quality independents. Now, as you do have standard, just foreign recruit units as well, including the Enkidu Archer. The Enkidu Archer is probably the actual highlight of your roster, because they have longbows, and they're relatively cheap. So you can spam out a ton of longbows and do that. You have Enkidu Warriors, who actually are not appreciably worse than your Enkidu Soldiers, because they do slightly less damage on a hit, but other than that, all their stats are the same, and they cost fewer resources and recruitment points. And you have Enkidu Warriors with Spears, who I don't know why they exist. They're the same unit, but with a spear, and I can't really think of a situation where I would necessarily want the spear. I guess it does slightly less damage and is longer, so I suppose technically they get a chance to repel people with swords. But that's not really going to be relevant 99% of the time, I'm going to say. And these guys are just garbage. I mean, they don't even have a shield or anything. Their defense is low, they have no armor, they suck. So I would always get these guys instead. The extra 3 resources for the shield is worth it. So, that's the roster for Earth. So the question is, what can you do with this? You have powerful Earth magic, powerful nature magic, you have high HP units, you have stealthy death mages, and you have unexceptional but solid recruitable combat mages with air and earth magic. So Earth is your big thing, nature is your big thing. Air and water you kind of have on the side. You have little bits and pieces of those as you go along. The last piece of the puzzle, national summons. Has several. First of all, you can summon buffaloes, which are just animal tramplers. You can summon Kusariku, and Kusariku are bullmen, and they're actually pretty good. In fact, I think it's time to hop over to the mod inspector so I can show you the national summons and units. Okay, so here are Ur's national summons. The Buffalo we just talked about. Animal, Trampler, Berserker. Not terrible. High morale, but very low magic resistance. So in the early game, a couple castings of Herd of Buffalo can be fairly useful. Because they can just charge in and trample things. That said, their protection is very low, so they will die. The Kusariku is, to my mind, the more general purpose summon of Kusariku have an anti-demon weapon that hits for very high damage because of their very high strength. They also have a second attack. They have a gore attack, which doesn't show up for some reason, but it's basically just strength damage. Their protection is not great. Their hit points are quite high, 34 hit points, and their skills are decent, but the important thing is that they have 2 attacks. You summon them 2 at a time, they cost 3 earth gems each, which is a little bit expensive, but on top of everything else, they're sacred. That means, and they have spirit sight so they can see in the dark, which is a nice little Benny. So that means that they can benefit from a regeneration bless, and a regeneration bless means they'll be regenerating 4 hit points per round. If you combo that with some earth buffs like Marble Warriors, Legions of Steel, etc., etc. Legions of Steel wouldn't help them all that much, but you might as well throw it on. Strength of Giants. You could easily get them up to the point where they are very hard to kill and they're hitting very hard, especially because in the late game you could also be throwing down air buffs with you could probably boost up to casting Fog Warriors if you really worked at it. So Kusariku, good units, very solid with the right bless and the right buffs on them. The Ugalu, you see a little bit less often because they require Air 4 to cast, or Air 3 to summon, and you don't natively have Air 3. You have to kind of take a god to do that, or get a hold of an air booster from somewhere. You have to do something. However, they are sacred, flying, anti-demon Air 3 mages, so these are kind of the equivalent of harbingers for They cost 24 air gems, which you're likely to have because you are sight-searching with your air gudus, and in fact, I would say probably, natively speaking, it's worth empowering a Gudu once to get Ugalus. It'll cost 45 air gems, but you're not spending your air gems on a ton of other things, except maybe air quills. And having a few flying air 3s to drop into battles and cast Storm for you would be really, really useful. So Ugalus, good summons. New to Dominions 5, you did not have any of these summons in Dominions 4. The Anzu is an interesting one that I've never actually played with. Surprisingly cheap. 6 air gems for a very high hit point flying dude with 2 AoE breath attacks, plus a bite, plus talons. I'm on the fence. Could be useful, but I think it comes so late that you really won't necessarily need it. Might be usable in a flying raiding squad. For example, I could see summoning an Ugalu and several Anzus to deep strike into enemy territory, especially to meet another army. And then the Umu Apkalu is the big one, and unfortunately also the very most complicated and difficult to get for In fact, for as painful as it is, I almost recommend ignoring this summon, because it's so tempting. Because the Umu Apkalu is one of the best mages in the game. Very high astral, earth, air, nature, holy 2, and water 3 if you need water 3. A crap ton of research points, hilariously. Disease healer, inspiring researcher, gives a supply bonus. They have all kinds of utility. However, they require astral 5. And as you have no native astral. This is a spell that was designed for Middle Age Uruk, which has a lot of astral available. Middle Age Uruk gets all of summons and vice versa. So as if for some reason you have astral, you can summon Apkalu. However, you're unlikely to have astral 5 unless you built your god to do it, and building your god to do it sacrifices a lot. I just don't think it's worthwhile. I think you mainly need to lean on your earth and your nature, with air and water to an extent backing them up, and not worry about the Umu Apkalus, not worry about the astral magic. So I would kill those guys. These two are the ones that are going to be your meat and potatoes. Summoning a lot of Kusariku is definitely a way to use earth gems that's viable, can give you a decent return. Summoning 3 or 4 Ugalu over the course of a game, very, very handy. Ugalu are excellent units, especially because you can easily give them shoes that boost their map move, and since they fly, They can then be hopping over 5 or 6 provinces, airdropping in, spamming out air elementals, casting storm, letting all of your Gudus thunderstrike, all kinds of cool shit they can do. They're great. In terms of heroes, you do also have some pretty good heroes. The Enkidu of the Moon is the one way, if you get her, you can summon Apkallu, because she's Astral 3, and also has the Earth crosspath, so she can forge herself crystal gear with a pair of Earth boots. And so she can forge Starshine Skullcap, Crystal Coin, boom, she's Astral 5, she can summon Apkallu. That might by itself be a reason to consider taking luck on Other heroes, the favorite of Enki, nobody really cares. He is immortal, so he's an immortal nature 3, but he's not very good other than that. And the Apkallu, not the Umu Apkallu, but the Apkallu Uan. He's amphibious, and he's a disease healer and an inspiring researcher, so he's cool. But I wouldn't say he's super special. I mean, he gives you Water 4, but you don't need Water 4. He gives you Earth 3, which you already have, and Nature 2, which you have in spades. So, I wouldn't really worry. Like, Uan, don't really care about Uan. Enheduanna, on the other hand, if you can get a hold of Enheduanna, that's very, very valuable, and it changes the way the game will play, because now you have access to Apkallu summons, when you usually didn't before. Let's hop back into the game, and I'll talk about what the build that I chose to show off and why. Alright, so, as you noticed, I had decent expansion, but my national troops are terrible. The way I had decent expansion was, I took a Great White Bull. The Great White Bull is in one of the upper echelons of expanders. Very solid. I took Nature 7, Earth 5, which is relatively affordable for regeneration and fire and shock resistance. This will make my Sacreds tough. My Sacreds will be regenerating, my Kusarikus will be regenerating 4 HP per turn later in the game, and they'll have shock and fire resistance, so they'll be hard to stop with evocations. Thunderstrikes will still hurt them, but probably won't kill them in one shot, and they'll be resistant to the AoE stun effect. So once I start summoning Apkallu, I'll be able to maintain that for quite some time, and they'll remain useful for a long, long time. He did a ton of work. That bull took that province, that province, that province, all of these provinces, these 2 provinces. These provinces were taken by my national troops, and it was a struggle. And these 2. I'm sorry, I think it was... Actually, no, that one was taken by the bull. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My national troops, in total, took 7 provinces in 12 turns. Expanding as without an Awake Expander is hard. I would always take an Awake Expander, because otherwise, you're going to be small and you're going to be eaten. Has reasonable selection of Awake Expanders. They have the Great White Bull, they have the Man-Eater, which is a pretty good one. They also have an almost unique expander called the Shedu, who is Earth Astral Crosspath. If you wanted to guarantee easy access to Apkallu summons, Umu Apkallu, that's the one you should take, especially because you can resurrect him with no penalty. But he is a much weaker expander, and the odds of you failing expansion are a lot better. So for my money, I would take the Great White Bull. I just would. He's worth it. Now, in order to pay for that Nature 7, Earth 5, I did take Misfortune. And I took Magic 3 because I wanted better research. You could easily ditch the Magic 3 in order to go Neutral Luck, which would give you a chance of getting your heroes. You could even potentially finagle it by dropping the Earth. If you cut Earth down to 1, you could probably go... Actually, what I would probably do would be to ditch the Nature first and go up to Earth 7 and get Fortitude Bless instead of Regeneration, which would still be pretty effective, and you can still cast Regeneration because you have these really powerful Nature Mages. I haven't recruited any of them yet. I can start recruiting one here in just a second. I'll start recruiting one just to show you. So we'll recruit an Enkidu Shaman. And over here, I've recruited my first Bone Reader. He came out with a water random, unfortunately, which is sad, but he can start site searching. So this is like kind of what I would expect out of expansion. Your troops are kind of expensive and they kind of suck. So you want to recruit relatively few of them. Your palisades are expensive, so you're going to be slow off the mark when it comes to building forts. However, you can build a couple of labs and start pumping out useful mages before you've built any forts. So right here, I've got a Shaman recruiting, I've got Bone Readers recruiting. This is the equivalent of a fort, these 2 provinces, that I spent 1,000 gold on. And they will be pumping out an average of a mage per turn. So that's a viable strategy. The downside to this is it's vulnerable. If I was next to Vanheim or something, Vanheim could easily raid me and destroy my labs, which would be extremely... Or, well, actually, they wouldn't destroy the labs. They could destroy my temples, but not my labs. They would just take the labs over. Although, they could burn the labs down after taking the province, if they wanted to go the Scorched Earth route. And that would be extremely destructive, and I would lose a lot of money if they were doing that, and I just wouldn't have a good way to get back from it. As a side note, as you have access to recruit anywhere Enkidu scouts. Any province can recruit these bad boys. So you can very, very easily set up a scout network that sees a lot. You can see it's only turn 12. I already have vision, pretty decent vision outside my own borders to the north, because I have 2 provinces pumping out Enkidu scouts. Income, not great. It is the early era after all. There's not a whole bunch of money around, and as I said, your troops are more expensive than humans, while not being incredibly more valuable. So you have to expect that you are going to have money problems to an extent. Taking good scales can mitigate that, but of course if you're taking really good scales, you're not taking a good bless, which means you're not going to be taking maximal advantage of those sacred summons in the later game. So there is a balancing act there. For myself, I would probably go bull. You can definitely tweak this, like I said. In hindsight, I probably would want to go fortitude and luck instead. Let's take a look at how that works. Let's go create an god. Or the first city. Oh, also, you've got these underwater guys, the Kululu. If you go underwater, they're also there. They're not very good. They're just not very good. They're Enkidu, but underwater. And it doesn't help them. Kululu sages are water too, which is nice. And they're good researchers, which is nice. But beyond that, not really, like, nothing special. So yeah, I would probably want to go like 7, maybe nature 2. Definitely take the heat. You need growth, of course. You can afford to dump productivity a little bit because your troops that require resources are pretty garbage anyway. So you can afford to take at least a point of productivity down. You do have to have some dominion. You can also afford to drop a point of turmoil, probably. You can get luck 2 this way, but really if you're going luck, you do want luck 3. In which case, you're down to, like, Earth. I don't think Earth 7 is hard to get. You could go hard skin. Hard skin would help somewhat, but it doesn't help your, it does not help your chosen sacreds any. Your Enki's chosen, it makes them prop 14, which is barely a change that's worthwhile. So I would probably just straight up go Fortitude if you were going Earth Bless. And then you have to drop another scale. Probably at this point I would just tank Sloth to 3 and just resign yourself to not using your armored units. Like hardly at all. Just rely on Enkidu soldiers and foreignrec recruits. You can see here, only recruitable in non-fort provinces. These guys can be recruited in all swamps. So if you happen to find a swamp that has reasonable recruitment points, you can spam Enkidu Reavers, you're just not going to find one. And Enkidu Shamans, once again, non-fort provinces. If you build a fort, the Enkidu Shamans become non-recruitable. So this is probably... yeah, I'd probably go something like that. That could work if you wanted to go for the hero route. Or, you can just go Misfortune, take Magic, take better scales. You can have this, which is not bad at all. You can even go a little bit of Turmoil, or you could go a little bit of Sloth in exchange for a little bit of Order to get your recruitment points up, because you do tend to get recruitment point capped. Actually, I was finding I wasn't all that recruitment point capped, so probably Sloth would be fine. And then maybe you could bump up to Dominion 5 or something. There's lots of little tweaks you could do. Taking Nature 2 so this guy can cast Personal Regeneration would be really nice, because that will let him, well, regenerate. And yeah, you're going to rely a lot on the magical power of Enkidu Shamans. You're going to have a lot of nature, you're going to have a lot of earth. If you're lucky enough to get a swamp early, you will be relying on the Bone Readers. You'll have a lot of death access. Eventually you'll be able to get into Wraith Lords and Liches and Immortals. You're not going to use your capital-only mages hardly at all. These guys exist to claim thrones. They do not exist to fight. They're not very good at fighting. They're expensive. They can lead armies, which is nice, and they can provide some magical support to those armies. NCs can cast Foul Vapors, which is kind of cool. but you don't really need to do that a lot. Ishibs, not going to use a whole lot. Gudus, you're going to use massively, everywhere, all the time. These guys are your standard, basic bread and butter combat mage. They're great. And then you're going to use your summons quite a lot. In terms of gems, you have a lot of nature gems, 3 per turn right from the start, and then you also get 2 water and 1 earth. You are going to want to start site searching for earth pretty rapidly, because having a lot of earth will be valuable to you. In particular, if you're lucky, you can get up to Earthblood Deep Well before somebody else does, and that will make you very, very powerful. That's going down Enchantment, which is a pretty good spell for you because you have Earth and you also have the Death Crosspath. So Enchantment is a pretty decent school for you, depending on if you have the swamps, of course. But getting to Earthblood Deep Well first, very, very handy. You also, of course, want to go down Conjuration. Kusarikus are only Conjuration level 4. So if you have the Earth income, you can start kicking those guys out pretty early in the mid-game. And if you have a solid Bless, they can be very effective for you because they have a lot higher attack density than your native troops. Also, if you end up fighting Blood Nations, Kusariku murder demons pretty effectively. Then at level 5, you have Summon Ugalu. If you've gotten the Air Gem income together, you can empower a Gudu in air and start summoning these guys, and these guys will really boost the power of your armies. At level 7, you can call Anzus, which I wouldn't worry about too much. At level 8, you can call Apkalus if you've been lucky enough to get that one hero. So that's a little bit of a schizophrenic nation, very, very weak in troops, very, very dependent on non-fort provinces. Their base meat and potatoes mages come from forts, but their powerful mages come from outside forts. And you're going to want a lot of Enkidu shamans. They're very, very good. They're a main draw of the nation. So focus on them, get them active, use them. They are of remarkable power. And Bone Raiders are also very cool and excellent raiders and this, that, and the other thing. So, that's I like them. I don't play them much. I find them difficult to use. But some players have been very successful with them. Chronos 12 played in Once More Into the Breach and almost won. Ended up one of the last few contenders after I was eliminated. So props to them. And it'd be interesting to see if they have anything to say about So, Chronos, leave me a message down in the comments. Tell me what you think about what your strategy was. Explicate things for us. And to all of you, thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode.